Howdy, howdy, naughty here. Now, before we proceed, I would like to define critique or criticism, as is its synonym. A detailed analysis and assessment of something, especially a literary, philosophical, or political theory. If you'd prefer the verb instead of the noun, evaluate in a detailed and analytical way. The reason I'm defining it is just so people understand that it is not inherently negative, and is something that we should put more of our stories through. And I suppose this won't be so strange compared to the last few videos. Reviews seem to be something I'm used to now. Today, as I'm sure you might see in the title, we are going to be reviewing Fallout. And I've chosen Fallout for a couple of reasons. Most of you seem to want me to strike while the iron's hot, as one may say. And I was willing to do so because I have my own opinions on the series. Opinions that the general public doesn't seem to really agree with, or at least have themselves. Now, for those unfamiliar, the way I will do it is I'm going to read notes that I have on each episode one at a time, say my thoughts on the episode, and when I finish reading episode thoughts, then I will give my thoughts on the series as a whole. And if there are things wrong with the episode that I did not mention in my notes for the episode, then it is going to probably be because I'm going to tackle that with other issues that may have happened with the series as a whole. So, no time like the present, let's go ahead and get started. Season 1, Episode 1, The End. This episode establishes the setting and what happened with the apocalypse. This episode follows 3 people, Lucy, Maximus, and the Ghoul, and before I proceed, I will go ahead and let y'all know that the beginning sequence was fantastic. I enjoyed watching Cooper and all of them at the birthday party, establishing the world, doing some passive world building, Cooper giving his little rule of thumb, pardon the pun, and the dread that came with the bombs dropping, the utter fear that followed. Lucy is okay. I mean, as a character, she gets married to a raider, and her dad gets kidnapped. And if you want me to elaborate, what I mean is, that's the plot of her portion. She accidentally gets married to a raider, as 32 ended up getting ransacked by them. And she wanted to get married so that she could have kids. Unknowingly, she ended up getting set up with a raider. And the raiders ended up taking Lucy's dad. After that, Maximus, the most bland. He's in the Brotherhood of Steel, gets framed for harming Dane, and becomes a squire. I would elaborate further, but that does pretty much sum up what happened. The Ghoul, the best, is introduced by simply killing the mercenaries that freed him. And for his situation, the best I can do for elaborating would be the Ghoul was introduced by being stuck in what seemed to be some sort of coffin for a long time, decades, with a couple IVs of various fluids. I'm assuming to keep him alive since he is a ghoul and he needs those. I'm going to go ahead and clear up now that I've played one of the Fallout games, Fallout New Vegas, and outside of that, I've not played other games. So I went into the show with as unbiased an opinion as I could in order to properly review it. Overall, I would give the first episode a 4 out of 5. I cannot wait to see more. Season 1, Episode 2, The Target. This episode follows Dr. Wiltzig and establishes that what the lab does and that their turrets either can't aim or just can't harm anything. I know that they wanted to establish that their base could defend itself, but they also did not want to harm Wiltzig. So in their shoes, Wiltzig should have known that when he approached the little receptacle where the turret could escape, he should have known right there to run, and just as he's running and going beyond the corner, then it comes out and shoots. That's how I think it should have been done. Maximus was a dum-dum and a dingus. While yes, Titus was rude and brutish the entire time, that only increased and became unbearable after Maximus froze and stopped doing his job as a squire. The fact that the bear died after a single shot sort of shows Maximus as being incompetent more than Titus being a bad knight. This episode, in my opinion, also shows that it would have been a much better idea to simply have Lucy start journeying with Dr. Wiltzig after the campfire scene. It almost had the perfect setup. I complain here because they ended up writing themselves into a corner later. And because Lucy and Wiltzig end up meeting in the city anyway. The ghoul also ends up being in the city and causes a rampage. He blows up the doctor's foot while killing quite a few people because he's the ghoul and he is awesome. Maximus comes in the Brotherhood suit and distracts the ghoul, who's just having a blast. And while the doctor gets his foot replaced, he suggests Lucy take him. And then I wonder what Majune's plan was, since she just had no one to take Wiltzig anyway. And while with the good doctor, the Vault Dweller has to decapitate him. And to elaborate just a little bit, Wiltzig, while being carried, he ends up determining that he would be too much of a liability, even though he has a new foot. And because he does not want to slow Lucy down, and because he knows that he himself is not very important anyway, and he took a cyanide pill, so he informs Lucy that she will have to decapitate him due to his apparent uselessness otherwise. I will give this episode a 3 out of 5, solely because the plot armor was very thick. There were a lot of coincidences that I didn't want to just chalk up, and I want to keep this part of the conversation light because I will mention that in my overall thoughts. Season 1, Episode 3, The Head. This episode starts off with Lucy, who, after cutting off the doctor's head at his request, tries investigating and gets shot. She explores, and the head gets taken by a mutated axolotl, which has some fantastic effects. Oh my goodness. The ghoul ended up catching up to her and made our dear Lucy into bait. The monster tries to eat her, but she whacks the monster with a bag and shoos it away as to not become future excrement. The ghoul is unhappy as she destroyed his medicine, and he takes her to get more. Maximus remains not interesting to me as he leaves his power suit unattended. As expected, he fights off a gang and then ends up reporting himself as dead after beating them and being contacted by the Brotherhood. They send his bully as a minion, and he bullies his bully. Overall, this episode, I'm not feeling very generous, so I think I will give it a 3 out of 5. It was not that bad, but the lows just were very low. Although I will give the highs, them being very high, so no, I'll make it a 3.5 out of 5. Because the ghoul is great. Season 1, Episode 4, The Ghouls. This episode starts with Lucy and the ghoul meeting a feral named Roger. After Lucy sees what can happen, the ghoul shoots Roger. When I say sees what can happen, I mean sees what can happen if a ghoul goes too long without taking their medicine. I've been skipping the vault scenes up to this point, but I'll quickly explain that they've been dealing with the aftermath of the raiders, and this episode further explores that and introduces a couple interesting mysteries. Skipping rad water scene, skipping Bert booty call scene. Lucy gets brought into a building and gets a new finger, as her index was severed, but comes to find the nice robot wanted her organs. Norm begins exploring the mysterious Vault 32. Lucy stops the organ thievery and frees ghouls, but comes to learn when it's too late for a ghoul. This episode, in my opinion, one of the best of the series. On top of having a fantastic way of establishing their mysteries, and a fantastic way of dealing with aftermath for the vaults getting raided, I also just love the ghoul and Lucy's dynamics. I love watching them interact, and I love that they are seen so often with one another in the series as a whole. They are great together as a pair, and I'm excited to see that in season 2 even. Overall, this episode, 4.5 out of 5. Season 1, Episode 5, The Past. Maximus reveals to Thaddeus that he's a criminal, and does not start off by saying, "So Titus was actually killed by a bear." Thaddeus, understandably, removes the fusion core powering the armor and takes Wilczek's head. Lucy encounters Maximus, and they make a deal, involving Maxie helping Lucy and vice versa. They encounter Shady Sands, and Lucy is taught what happened to it. In the end, they find a new vault, and Norm continues uncovering the mystery. And I say Norm continues uncovering the mystery because unless you want me to elaborate step by step with what he did, there's not really much to say about it. Not that it's not interesting, I'll mind you. It's just, there's not a lot to comment on with how exactly he goes about it. Overall, this episode, 4 out of 5, I think. It was pretty good, although there was definitely just, for some reason, in my opinion, the writers don't seem to do Maxie a whole lot of a whole lot of, what's the word? A whole lot of good. A whole lot of justice, there we go. That's just my opinion. I understand that some people may disagree. Now, Season 1, Episode 6, The Trap. Despite the naming, this is actually the episode that does the most showing of the general past as a whole, and everything Cooper had discovered before becoming the ghoul. And I do believe a couple of the previous episodes mention and show brief moments of the past, but this is the episode in which they become very important again. And I like it. He discovers the motives of the commies. I know that they're not commies, which, for those that don't know, is just a short way of saying communists, and why they simply think Vault-Tec is the devil. And he discovers Vault-Tec's general plans and why they're so reliant on these vaults actually working out. Lucy and Maxie are being cared for in Vault Vor, and are doing the classic trope of one's suspicious about it at first, and then the other, which I thought was fine. Oh shoot, I think I forgot to mention for the previous episode synopsis that at the end of it, they ended up finding a new vault and literally just fell into it. Decently funny. Now, I'm not a big fan of the trope. I thought the execution was fine. Overall, I think the episode is a 3 out of 5. It's not bad, but nothing to write home about, especially compared to a couple of previous episodes. And now, Season 1, Episode 7, The Radio. Maxie steals the Vault's fusion core and tries to rescue his one chance at sex. He tries to rescue Lucy, who was just being exiled with supplies. Naturally, he's forced by Lucy to return the core, and they venture forth. I can't remember if it was this episode or the previous that Thaddeus at some point trusts a strange man to give him medicine, and in exchange gives the fusion core he took. He then goes to a radio station with low-quality fiddling music and radios in the Brotherhood of Steel. Lucy and Maxie encounter Thaddeus, and thanks to an arrow to the neck, find out Thaddy is a ghoulie. As the Brotherhood arrives, Maxie tells everyone else to run, and shares a kiss with Lucy while letting her keep the Wiltzik head and taking Rando's head. He bashes the face in first, so it's fine. The ghoul is captured by someone trying to re-establish the government. Because the ghoul is awesome, he kills the sheriffs, and it's revealed that he's after Moldaver too. And now for the final episode, the one which has the longest synopsis, because it was the hardest for me to summarize, or at least take notes on, I guess. Season 1, Episode 8, The Beginning. Vault Tech is revealed at this point in a flashback to have been the ones to drop the bombs in order to sell the vaults. Oh, I forgot to rate the previous episode. 3.5 out of 5. And let's see, right, sell the vaults. Because when you own half of everything, you definitely know killing 80% of your potential pay pigs will only give you profits. Lucy encounters Moldaver and gives her the head, which held the secret to reinventing cold fusion, apparently. Moldaver then confirms Shady Sands was actually bombed by her father, who's currently in a cage, and that as a result, her mother was made into a ghoul. Her dad tries denying, but Lucy ain't buying, and yet he just kept trying. Maxie talked to a Brotherhood head honcho and revealed where the head is. He was made into a knight because the head honcho generally likes little Maxie, and all hell breaks loose for Moldaver literally before she presses the button to activate everything. I think this would have been so much better if, since all she had to do was press the button, she panicked, pressed the button, and then went to war. The ghoul arrives and reveals the power armor is nothing to fear while eliminating just person after person. Norm finds out about Bud's buds and what Vault 33 or 31 was built to do, all while Moldaver explains what she knows about the vaults to Lucy. Forgot her name for a second. Whoops. Maxie arrives while Moldaver is gone and frees Lucy's dad, like the idiot he is. The ghoul shows up, there's a bit of a tussle, and in the end, Lucy's dad takes the power armor Maxie wore and runs. The ghoul takes Lucy with him to go where Hank went, and Maxie and Moldy have a bit of a talk before she dies. Naturally, Maxie is given credit for killing Moldaver just after she pressed the button, and they have their talk. And the series ends with Hank over the horizon of Las Vegas, the series hinting at where it'll next take place. And this episode, I would say, despite being the season finale, is at best a 3.5 out of 5. Overall, I will go ahead and say, despite my individual episode ratings, the series as a whole was quite enjoyable. It had a lot of great things to offer, so overall, the highs were just too high, 4 out of 5. But there were a lot of lows. I mean, plot armor is just a ridiculous little thing the series just keeps using, in my opinion. A whole lot more coincidences than there need to be. Like, if I had here's a drinking game for when you watch the series, take a shot every time a character just so happens to end up stumbling where they actually need to. Especially take 2 if it was where a previous important character was. If you do that, you are sure to have a great time before dying of alcohol poisoning. Because it is just bad how often that happens. And just... I don't remember much about the Fallout games that I play, but if they wanted to be a bit more accurate, I think I would have recommended maybe introducing a few more of the smaller rotated creatures like the rad rats and a few more rad roaches than what we see. Everything just overall felt way too easy for the protagonists. Even with what hardship she did go through, it felt like the hardship came in waves at a time instead of just non-stop. And in an environment like the apocalyptic one, such as Fallout, I think it just would have been better if the protagonists just weren't given any breaks until closer to the end. Especially with, in my opinion, the Vault 4 portion might be some of the weakest. Not because I dislike the concept, but more so because I'm not big on the execution. Especially since I'm not sure it was necessary to have characters praise Moldaver as if she were a goddess known as Flame Mother. That was something I didn't cover because it ended up not being important. The show will act like it was, but it wasn't. Overall, I hope this next season doesn't have the plot armor issue, as I admittedly do look forward to it. And with that, I won't keep you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope you sleep well. Thank you for watching. Duty call.